Today, I'll be presenting on intergenerational housing and how it could be a potential intervention on the loneliness epidemic across generations. Loneliness is something very difficult to measure and define because it exists at the nexus of social, physiological, and mental well-being. Researchers have struggled to determine if loneliness is the cause of mental health diseases or instead if it is the symptom of them. Regardless, research has shown that loneliness manifests across many forms of well-being with broad consequences. One estimate found loneliness could cause up to $960 billion in annual healthcare costs for the United States. What researchers have begun to uncover is that the loneliness epidemic impacts different generations disproportionately and in different ways. Older generations tend to report higher rates of loneliness compared to younger people. A possible explanation for this can be an organic increase in isolation, which occurs with aging. A 2017 survey found that 220,000 UK seniors reported not speaking to a friend or a relative in over a month. To combat loneliness, senior citizens have used the healthcare system to seek social interaction. Many doctors report feeling unequipped to provide treatment for loneliness, and the health system does not offer a current framework for loneliness treatment. The research focusing on loneliness and seniors highlights that an intervention for loneliness can create greater specificity through utilizing an aging lens. From a design perspective, the issue of interface can be interpreted as a possible cause of loneliness in older generations. Senior citizens struggle to find and maintain face time with relationships. Leading with the concept of interface enables designers to define a potential cause of loneliness in older generations and create measurable outcomes. For younger generations, the loneliness epidemic can be directly connected to the increase in mental health diseases for young people. The prevalence of depression and anxiety have been continually rising amongst college students. Research has provided several possible explanations as to what could explain the rise in mental disease, social media and finances included. Considering the reported causes of mental diseases, designers can consider the issue of loneliness and mental disease in younger generations as a problem of status. Status encompasses all the external factors for which college students must balance to maintain mental health. This includes friendships, self-image, future careers, finances, and academic performance. Considering strategies to maintain balance between these factors creates a policy framework to intervene on loneliness and mental health for younger people. Taking into account previous literature and the current loneliness epidemic, the key question I was answering was, how can designers address the loneliness epidemic for multiple generations? A possible intervention which has gained traction is intergenerational housing. Intergenerational housing can come in a variety of forms, but in essence, it is the promotion of multi-generational communities through the determination of resident composition. On the design continuum, it extends between the realms of interiors and the urban realm. Intergenerational living can be viewed as a topology across multiple scales. Intergenerational housing approaches dwelling through a strengths-based perspective. On the right, the graphic depicts how this conceptually plays out. For example, older generations tend to have less issues with finances because of the accrual of wealth, whereas younger generations have greater capacity to contribute to labor because of their youth. The result of intergenerational housing is a strengthening of community and a reduction in loneliness through using the strengths of generations to supplement the weaknesses of others. One university has already taken the first step in showing the efficacy of intergenerational housing. Mount Mary University in Milwaukee will complete a $45 million intergenerational housing complex. It will be comprised of college students, retirees, and even nuns. Architects created the complex to have flexible amenities and services which promote relationships between different groups and generations. This is a framework for understanding the design to outcomes for intergenerational housing. The first column shows the primary or explanatory impacts for residents, which can be measured in several ways. The second column highlights secondary outcomes. For example, for young people, the reduction in living expenses would be a directly measurable outcome through reporting rent before and during residency. This will lead to a reduction in financial stress, a psychological variable which can be measured through surveys. While this framework only showcases 2 degrees of outcomes, holistically the real ecosystem of outcomes will contain circular impacts. Continuing with the financial example, a reduction in financial stress could reduce physiological outcomes associated with anxiety. Utilizing this framework provides designers a conceptual understanding of designing and measuring impacts and outcomes within the dwelling ecosystem. In addition, I create a framework for designing intergenerational spaces. Through research and persona mapping, the following criteria were produced: accessibility and inclusivity, or the ways in which different generations can interact with a space; flexibility and scalability, the ways in which a space can change to accommodate to different generational needs; modality or interface, the forms of spatial and social connections a space fosters; and reliability, the ease and interdependence of residents utilizing the space. The image to the right is an example of an application of the framework to an intergenerational housing complex. Architectural moves such as clear wayfinding and minimal changes in surface elevation manifest as accessibility and reliability. The previous two deliverables provide a foundation for designers to approach researching and generating intergenerational spaces. The capacity of intergenerational housing to intervene against the loneliness epidemic across generations could drastically reduce negative physical, social, and psychological outcomes. One university has already taken the first step in pursuing such a space, which showcases that communities and the University of Michigan possess the power to provide the benefits offered through intergenerational housing.